Yo, what's up? It's your boy E.T. Welcome to another edition of Mass Impact, the educational podcast. Now, look, the reason why I started this, I truly believe that education is the way to close the gap, the wealth gap, the digital divide gap, the opportunity gap. Look, the American dream gap. Can I be honest? Everybody's not experiencing the American dream in the way it's supposed to be experienced. So the reason why we started the Mass Impact, the educational podcast, is to close that gap. Now look, mass is simple. It means motivate, actionable steps, which means what? We're going to give you strategies every week. So we're not just going to motivate you and inspire you, which is important, but we're going to give you actionable steps. And look, it's a support system, y'all. Thus Mass. It's your boy E.T. Now you know. Let's go.
Hey, what's up, fam? It's your boy E.T., man. Super excited, man. Super excited to actually bring some solutions to some of the challenges that we're facing in the educational system. And, I know firsthand, being a teacher, being in the classroom, it's so complex. You're talking about how the federal government plays a significant role on what we do every day. You're talking about on the state level. You're talking about the community and its impact. You're talking about parents, in the building, things that we deal with, whether it be administration, our peers, then students. It's a lot. So here's what I want to say. First of all, I brought a group of experts, right? And just by experts, I just mean like we've literally been in the field. Not that we're perfect, not that we know everything, but we've been in the field, right? And so we want to share with you some of the solutions. Like there's so many people talking about the problem, and so many people rehearsing what's going wrong. I think it's critical for us to also deal with reality, deal with issues, but bring some solutions to the table, right? Because at the end of the day, we all have, the same goal. And I think that's important for us to understand. Like somehow the methodology may be different. For some of us, the implementation may be different. But come on, guys, at the end of the day, we all care about students, and that's why we're here. And we all want to see students do better academically because we know the impact it has on their life. So here's what I want to do. I want to introduce to you Katie, who's been, Katie, you tell us how long have you been in the school system?
15 years. 15 years in the classroom and as a teacher leader, yeah.
Good. And then Mustafa, who's been, in the people business. Right.
Business.
Yeah. In the people business. And again, this is what school's about. School's about kids, your peers, other educators, administrators, whatever. Like policy is like, it's about people. Moose, how long have you been in the people business?
Man,
you look kind of young, but.
Yeah, I just wrapped up my first decade now in this industry. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Beautiful. So here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to offend you. Right, by bringing you another program. Like the one thing I know as an educator is that we were constantly bombarded with new stuff. I'll never forget when No Child Left Behind came, and it was it was research and data and paperwork and training upon paperwork upon training upon research upon. It was a lot. It was a lot plus what we had to do. So in no way. Would I, waste your time or disrespect you? Like I understand as an educator, the complexity, of the work that we do day to day. We are here to not complicate your life any further, add anything to your life. We're actually here to simplify the work that you do. Like I'm being honest with you. If you would just stick with us, for the next maybe 20, 30 minutes, of course we have multiple pieces that we want to share with you. But this first piece, I think, is so important. And if you don't mind me going back, before the classroom to my educational journey, and specifically Michigan State University, K through 12 was, my focus. And at that time, maybe even today, I don't know, but during the time frame I was at Michigan State and the College of Ed, I'm proud to say that we had the #1 program in K through 12. Okay. And I remember both in the master's and the PhD program, there was a common thread. And when I say common thread, I mean that the entire department really focused on this, not teachers individually, but collectively, what we focused on is being informed, right, before we make a decision. Like that was the biggest thing they taught us, was like, look, do not, whatever you do as an educator, because you literally have somebody else's educational future in your hands, you must make sure that you, one, are aware, and number two, that you are properly informed, because every decision you make will be based upon it. So I just want you guys to understand what I'm saying before we get started. We were not taught practice first. We were taught awareness first.
Yeah.
Collect the data, get the research, understand the issue. Make sure you spend enough quality time knowing what the challenges are before you address them. And I'm just being honest. For a lot of us, the educational environment is more complex than it probably needs to be, because many of us as teachers have a savior, a superhero mentality. And we like to, just being honest, we're solution-driven people. We like to get to the solution, but sometimes we are getting to the solution before we actually have the right information. And so that's what we're going to talk about in this first series, making informed decisions. Moose, I don't know if you want to start us off, but give us some theory context, if you don't mind, and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the best and worst things that come with experience, the first thing, of course, or the best thing is experience. When you get experience, you have experience. The worst thing, though, is that experience also brings comfort. When you've done something for a long time, you do it the same way all the time. And when you think about just life in general, the seasons change, the temperature changes, everything changes. And so if you were using, the iPhone 8 some years back, you're a few models behind, although you have a pretty strong piece of technology in your hand. And so that's the piece here that I think can start to disrupt when you talk about just interaction or communication between two human beings, whether that be teacher to student, teacher to teacher, teacher to parent, or teacher to leadership. That's where the issue really comes into. I've done something for the same way for such a long time, and I have not revisited maybe some of my biases, some of the assumptions or the patterns that I just naturally make instinctively, not intentionally. It's not your intention to do harm or to maybe treat someone a certain way. It's just intuitively it started to happen because you've done it that way for so long. Yeah. And so when we start to challenge some of our ways, our methods, and say, hey, is this still relevant? Is this still up to date? Am I still really taking the best possible approach to create the outcome that is favorable for the student? That's when I think really things start to happen. So that's really, what this is about when we introduce the flight assessment and some of the teachings tied to it. It's an opportunity to take an inside look at yourself and say, okay, what are the things that make me tick? How can I learn more about the wonderful things that I bring to the table that obviously made me want to put on this cape to enter education? Absolutely. And then what are some of the things that I also need to look out for? Because we all have some of our strengths and some corresponding blind spots that unfortunately even come about because of our strengths, right? Our strengths are so dominant in some areas that they create some blind spots and limitations. And ultimately, that's what we're looking to kind of tackle here. So when you think about what we're going to be covering today, and Doc, you really opened it up with this, but it's this idea of evidence-based assumptions or evidence-based decisions versus decisions that are based in assumptions. All right. And I know you kind of set us up around. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. The something in facts versus something that is maybe kind of, it used to be that way.
Yeah, it definitely used to be that way. So guys, as we're going through this tool, I just want you to see this as a tool again, that's going to simplify, right? It's simplify, really help us to really lock in on best practices. And again, not familiar practices, or I've done these practices for quite some time, or these practices work, 3 years ago, No. We really want you to see this as a tool to say, hey, what's the facts? What's the evidence? Like what what do the students that are in this particular class, what do we know about them? You know, what do we know about this generation? Like, what do we know about math and science and social studies? Again, we just want to make sure that our awareness capacities is like at the highest level. You know, it's like, nope, we're not making an assumption. We know where north is. We know where south is. We know where east is. We know where west is. And if you're like me, I'm just being honest. Like, if you're in a new environment, sometimes I'm like, whoa, where is west? Where is east? But there's some evidence. The sun rises, you know what I'm saying? And the sun sets, right? So no matter where I am, you know, there's some things that I can go, okay, this is stable. This is predictable. So I can use this to kind of get the results. And please hear me. Our goal for the few moments that we're together is the kids' outcome. It's not this assessment. But we believe that this is a tool that's going to help us to actually do what we said. And sometimes there's a gap between how we instruct, how they learn, and then the outcomes that we're looking for. So nobody's right, nobody's wrong. We just want to get to, I have a certain practice, they have a certain preparation, and we both are affected by if we actually get the outcomes. Well, what are the outcomes, Eric? Well, for me, at least, it is at minimum, you reach, you know, the standard, you know, like that. I would love for each one of my students to excel, but at least if we can meet the standard, if they're in the 8th grade, whatever that, you know, whatever you're supposed to be able to accomplish at the start and finish of the 8th grade, that's really the only thing we're looking at. So if you guys don't mind, Moose, let's show them the dangers inherently that we have with how we look at things to go, hey, we thought that was evidence, but actually, you know, it's assumption. And Moose does a phenomenal job with this next activity.
Yeah. And this is not pointed at anyone, right? But ultimately, right. when you see this image, you're immediately thinking, oh goodness, he lost his cool. I mean, prestige and all of the legacy that's tied to the family name. How could he do such a thing? Yeah. And really, Katie, what's happening is that we, unfortunately, as humans, are pretty selfish by nature. And I say selfish not because we don't want to share our food or take people out to lunch, but we're selfish because we want to communicate to everyone the way we are. We communicate with others the way we want to be communicated. So I want to push and motivate others the way I want to be pushed and motivated. And the more I do that, the more I become one-sided in my communication, and I start to miss out the full spectrum or the full detail of what's in the picture. Because I see something and I make an assumption. Oh, I've done that before. I know exactly what it's like. I don't take a moment to say, well, I wonder what happens if I were to look at this from a different perspective and ask myself, where does this child come from? What is his story, his experience, his background? What is that like? What is life at home like? I wonder why it's happening. And the minute you start to ask yourself why, you get a completely different picture. And for those of you familiar with this sequence of pictures, right, he's just saying, hey, man, I just had my 3rd child. He's not, you know, so when you look at it from one perspective, it gives you a completely different image. Versus when you look at a student or a colleague or whomever from a different perspective, this is a totally different idea. So that's just so powerful when you think about it just this way.
Yeah, I love it, man. I actually love it. Katie, if you don't mind, again, our next slide, we're going back to how we make decisions, right? Meaning, how do we prep for our classes? You know, what does our lesson plan look like? What are the elements inside of it, right? Do we have enough evidence to be able to put every child in the best position that he or she can be in, right? We're talking about making decisions as an educator. So in that, there are assumptions that can be made, right? Or evidence, right? And so I know I've spent a lot of time with Katie over the last, couple of years, and Katie, as someone that is absolutely in love with reading and believes that everybody should do it. And I think I now believe that too. You talked to me about a tool that is used in the educational arena. And I want you to kind of talk about that so that we can really help them to understand something that they're familiar with at this point, and then make a parallel between this flight assessment, and some of the assessments that you've used in the past, and how those assessments actually help inform the way you decided to give kids books.
Yeah, I mean, really what it comes down to, teachers are all familiar with the term formative assessment. So it's just making sure that we're using formative assessment to inform our instructional decisions, right? So the tool you're referring to that I often say is knowing students' reading levels. So knowing their Lexile levels is something that can be incredibly helpful K-12. So no matter what age level of student we're working with, and no matter what content area we are working in, it is extremely helpful to know what our students' skill levels are. And I know some teachers can get into this argument of like, we want to make sure that their Lexile level doesn't define them. They can't only read books at that level. And that's completely valid and very important. But just like the tool you're discussing, when we're looking at reading levels, does not need to define the student and should not, but it can inform our instruction.
Absolutely.
And so if we have the information about what can a student that's in front of us read confidently, that can help us to engage them with the material that we're putting in front of them, or to provide support to maybe more rigorous material that's in front of them. So it does not need to define our students, but when we have the information of what Lexile level or what reading level is something that is a good instructional level for them, or a challenge level, then it can inform our instruction on how we can best support them.
Absolutely. I love it. And so guys, what an amazing tool, because it informs you. So now when we talk about flight assessment, we're talking about engagement and how students like to engage in the learning process, right? How they like to connect, right? And I think any and every tool that we have is, again, about informative. So it doesn't mean that they are limited to, but what the assessment will show us is how. Like, how do you engage me? How do you help me to, at the end of the day, which I believe true education is about, making a connection. So how do I like to connect with this particular thing, right? And I think a lot of times we just give students information without understanding how they get engaged, how they get connected. I'll give you guys a prime example. I never connected academically because of grades. Like that never was appealing to me. I never looked at school as, I'm gonna get an A or a B. I never looked at school as, I'm gonna take this and use this in my career. I never looked at it like that. But when people started to show me how I could use education for my autonomy, oh man, I was locked in. Why? Because a part of my value system is independence. A part of my value system is, I like to do things the way I like to do things. So when people start saying to me, if you get a 4-year degree, it will depict the environment you work in, maybe how much money you make, the type of independence you'll have. Well, then if you go get a master's degree, even more independence. Man, if you go get a PhD, like even more independence. So for me, it wasn't necessarily attached to a check or a career as much as it was independent. So when I had instructors or teachers or professors who would say, man, Eric, if you learn this, then you could be an entrepreneur. You can work on your own time. You can travel when you want to travel. I was like, whoa, like, let's go. But just, where my reading level was, or specifically what job, that didn't appeal to me in the same way. So as we walk through this next phase, I want you to really think about, do I make assumptions? Do I have evidence? And what this tool will do is immediately show you, and we're going to walk you through how to be able to read it. But this first phase, we just want you to see that it will show you how a student likes to engage, and specifically how they connect. And why is this so critical? Because we make the assumption that there are certain students that don't like school, that they don't like learning, that they're not interested in it. And that's not the truth. I put up videos all the time for this generation, and sometimes I'll get 500,000 hits, 600,000 hits, right? Why? Because it's not that they don't like to learn. Maybe they don't like to receive information this way. Mm-hmm. So I think that's super critical. So Moose, if you don't mind walking us through how we move from making decisions based on assumption or how we make decisions based on evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about that same construct, I want you to ask yourself this question here. What happens when the right information goes to the wrong student? And so, yes, there's one definitive way to teach algebra. There's one definitive way to teach chemistry. But what if that information or that style goes to the wrong student because it's not in line with how they receive information, with how they view the world, or how they feel most engaged and connected or motivated to learn? And so the teacher may be right, but the student stays left behind, right? And again, by no fault of their own, but it's just because, as you mentioned, Katie, lack of information or not being informed on, well, what are the different styles? And so when we take this a step further, we know that the information we're sharing with you is based on William Marstons' patterns of behavior, his research theory that studied humans and the four categories that they fall into. And what he realized is that there are certain traits, characteristics, body language, and general behavior that are tied to people all across the world, right? And each of those categories actually belong or make up a certain percentage in the world. And so when you really start to look at it, you'll notice that if I'm teaching only as I am or communicating only as I am, then the only students who will learn are those who are naturally like me. And so if I'm a flight attendant, then I naturally only connect with about 30% of the student population because they too are flight attendants. But what about the grounds crews in the room? What about the air traffic controls or the pilots? And so just start to think about it that way, that the more I can learn other languages, literally, I can begin to connect with a wider array of students in that demographic or population. And so what are some things that you might need to know, right? Well, if you can start to look out for those traits, characteristics, and behaviors, as we mentioned, you'll start to see, okay, wait a minute. I remember Joey. I remember Thomas and Mike and Shaquille and Angela, because you recognize the traits and characteristics. And if you were to start to make the connection and say, okay, this means this is what they need, then how can I just prioritize that in my lesson planning, in my teaching, to make sure that that style is engaged? Over time, that's when connection starts to happen. And so when you look on, the top left, this is who we call our flight attendant category. Now, these students or these people in general, they're just naturally happy and optimistic. We have one of the most optimistic people on the planet right here with us. When you look at, Dr. Thomas or E.T., he wouldn't be himself if he's not optimistic when everyone is saying, I don't know, Doc, I don't think we should do it this time. That's just his natural demeanor. So they're always sociable. They love to talk, naturally happy and enthusiastic, have a ton of energy. They love hugs and they're almost like rubbing up on people and sometimes can't keep their hands to themselves just because that's just part of their natural demeanor, right? But then when you go on the opposite end of the spectrum to a more introverted style of a student or a personality type, say the air traffic control for that matter on the bottom right here. Now, this person is actually a lot more reserved. They're very careful and methodical. They're going to ask you a lot of questions, Katie. Hey, Katie, I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. I got some information, but can you give me a little bit more information? Is that not air traffic control? Like, I mean, without even thinking about it, that's really what I did this morning in preparation for this, right? It's like, hey, Katie, I got a couple of questions, right? Yeah. Why? Because they're perfectionists by nature. They want to make sure that there's a plan, there's a method to the madness. They're not as outgoing and as sociable. And so when they ask questions, they're not trying to disrupt or hold people back, but they really prefer to have more understanding. And so just with those two styles, and when you see one end of the spectrum versus the other end of the spectrum, and of course, we know the same exists for both the pilot and the ground crew, they have different needs and methods. As you start to make the connection, you'll say, maybe I can make some adjustments in how I do this and how I do that, and maybe allow for a little bit more group work to really bring this thing together. So yeah, Doc, maybe you can just expand on, why you see this whole thing being so important, especially when you start to see what each style is or what each student is.
Yeah. And I'll let Katie jump in as well when we talk about, reading and using something like this to match, a student's style, but, for me, I think it's important was because as a teacher, I wish I would have had this, and I'm talking about K through, really high school. When I taught at Oakwood Academy, I really wish I had this tool, because as much as I'd like to say, I didn't have any biases. I wasn't prejudiced. I literally look now, Moose, and see that my star pupil, was optimistic, was happy, was sociable. Like my star student. And Moose, there was times where I would be aggravated by the student that had a million questions. I'm like, look, we already talked. You're slowing me down. We look at the pace, the fast pace. They're more methodical. So I felt sometimes, Moose, that there was a tug of war in my classroom. I felt this tug of war. It's like, why are these kids asking me a series of questions? Like, I explained it. I wrote it on the board. Like, I can't explain it anymore. At this point, you're holding me and my lesson plan and instruction, you're holding us hostage. I didn't have this insight, Mustafa. I took it personal sometimes too, as just being honest as an educator. I took it personal. Like, every single day, you got a million questions, like every single day. And I found myself, whether I want to admit it or not, Moose, yes, I still tried to be the best teacher I could be, but I started to favor the student who was outgoing, who spoke, and a student who didn't speak, who was real reserved, but only wanted to talk to me when they had a bunch of questions. I felt, an attack on my, just my whole style, my whole approach. Those students who were, competitive, and super demanding, I kind of understood them, but sometimes my flight attendant, my grounds crew, sometimes I was like, man, you guys aren't engaged. And they are. They're just not engaged in the same way that my flight attendant was engaged. And so, just looking at this, I wish I would have had this a long time ago, because I felt that my 30% was 100%. And I never knew my 30% was only 30%. I didn't know that I was missing even the way I designed my lesson plan. We used to watch movies, we took field trips, it was so hands-on. Honestly, Moose, I don't know if I had a document that spelled out, like, let's say, for instance, you buy an appliance from a desk or something, or bed, and they give you the instruction manual where it gives you like every single step, every tool. Like, I really put a lot of my introverted students at risk because I never came in with that instruction manual. Like, now I look at it, it was like, my lesson plan was loose at best. It was loosely strategic, methodical at best. So I thought something was wrong with them. I thought they weren't engaging, that, they weren't, they didn't communicate enough. They pull, but, they didn't, it wasn't a mutual relationship. So again, had I had this information, which I have now, I'm not necessarily in the classroom like I used to be, but when we go to schools and when I work at Michigan State and I do the programs, I have much more respect for all four I think that's the important thing. While I may not still prefer all four, I value all four. And because I value all four, I treat people differently because I understand that it's an actual strength and it's not necessarily a corresponding weakness like I used to think, it was. So Katie, in terms of, books and, you're giving kids books or reading, how could this apply to that?
Yeah, I'm thinking specifically, I love to talk books, but I want to make sure we're engaging all teachers of all content areas. So I'm thinking about, any content area that you're going to put a text in front of a student. So whether that you're teaching world history or it's a chemistry chapter, whatever it is. And often we ask students to annotate a text, right? To go through and take notes and that kind of thing. And I'm just like thinking through each of these learning styles in my mind and how we probably as teachers naturally do what you just said and maybe approach annotating in a text in a way that is most toward our preference here. And if we're thinking about having all four of those personalities in our room, this concept is not foreign to teachers because they talk learning styles and learned about learning styles for a long time. But if you think about these four preferences in your room, your flight attendants are going to want to have the opportunity to discuss the article that is in front of them, right? So you're giving them some time to annotate an article, but for them, it's going to be really important to have that turn and talk time. So let's turn and talk. What were your aha moments, right? And some kids can sit and do that until they make great meaning out of a text because they love to have that conversation. And your pilots, they might want to come up with their own way to demonstrate their comprehension about a text, right? Like they might prefer that you just say, go read the text and they're going to come back and write, tell you about it, or maybe they want to write about it, or maybe you give them opportunities to like create a presentation, but they want to maybe be more in control of telling you how they understood the text that was in front of them. And then your ground screen, your air traffic control, I'm thinking they might really prefer having like a rubric or checklist in front of them, right? Like If you want me to annotate this text, please give me a checklist that says, circle important dates, write questions in the margin, put a summary sentence at the end of each paragraph or at the end of each page. And it's not that we can change. I know some teachers are hearing this and they're like, oh my goodness, how can I do all of that work? But we could take one lesson and do just each of those things without, we can reach all of them. It's okay to stretch people out of their preference as well, right?
Absolutely.
Speak to that, but I'm thinking we could take that lesson right there and do all of those things. Let's give them a rubric so everybody knows how to annotate it. Let's give them an opportunity to discuss. Let's give them an opportunity to share their comprehension or their questions about a text in their own way. And then everybody is engaging in a way that's preferred to them. And they're also being kind of stretched and pulled out of their comfort zone as well. Absolutely. So my guess is that article that you put in front of them is going to be so much more received and comprehended at a higher level.
And what's so funny when you say that? I know there are a lot of challenges with maybe doing it, Katie, but on the collegiate level, I saw it. Like you notice when you are in a major university, especially when you start talking advanced degrees, for whatever reason, that environment is more acceptable to, we've got different learning styles in here. We've got different preferences. People are engaged different. So we throw it all out. So for instance, I don't know if there was ever a class that I took in college where it wasn't an opportunity to do oral, where you had to do group work. I remember K through 12. I don't know. It was always group work. There was a lot of work that was like, hey, you just do this, you take this test. Yep. Right. There were opportunities to create presentations. We did a lot of stuff outside, like practicum work like real work outside of the classroom to make it make sense. So I know you're like, this is middle school, but I'm saying I've seen other humans create an environment where everybody. So the reason why I never got discouraged is because, yes, there were a lot of, written assignments in college, 1000%. But I got a lot of opportunities to shine in my particular preference, which is getting up and talk. So there was always a part of class where we got an opportunity to do a presentation. And so I never felt inferior. My confidence was not low because I knew it's going to be a point in this 16-week programmed that I'm going to get to shine. Whereas I do remember maybe middle school or high school, we were kind of one-dimensional, and my confidence level was low because I didn't like getting up in front of the class and doing spelling bees. Like I phonetically, I wasn't strong, so I always felt embarrassed. Like I always got kicked out the first or the second round, you know. And so it put me in a position where when we start talking language, I was like, yo, I'm out. You know, I'm going to intentionally act up so I can get kicked out. I'm going to intentionally not show up the day that we're doing a big spelling bee, you know what I'm saying? Because people are going to tease me because phonetically I'm not strong. Whereas again, in college, I had that opportunity to get up and speak. And that's just something that I do well. So when Katie talked about, you know, an opportunity to talk, I'm like, hey, I'm always for that. You know what I'm saying? And to her point, as I do it, things do click for me that don't click when I'm by myself and I'm reading a text alone. But when I have a partner and we're going back and forth and back and forth. So you'll notice that 90% of the time when you see ET doing something, either before or during, I am always saying, hey, if you guys don't mind, well, E, we're only going to be doing 5-6 minutes. Like, I'm not even an expert at that. I know, but I want you as my warm blankie, you know? And so to Katie's point, again, it's not that kids cannot learn. It's not that we don't want to be engaged, or it's not that the connection can't be made. But sometimes if we have a preference and we lead with that preference only, those individuals that don't share that preference, whether we mean to or not, they're kind of locked out, you know? And I must say this to you guys. I did not have a great experience K through 12. I absolutely love college. And I love college because it was much more independence in college than it was in K through 12. So it's not that I wasn't a learner. I just didn't feel that independence side of me. I didn't get that opportunity K through 12. But again, for those of you, you know, who are familiar, you know, college, especially as you go higher, you get more independence, you know, than you did, you know, before. So I'm sorry, Moose, but I just got to make sure the teachers know it's not that kids can't or they won't. And I don't want to put any more pressure on you, but we are leaders. And as leaders, we just have to find a way to get them engaged that they may not naturally do on their own.
Man,
all of them.
So good.
Every last one of them. Yep.
So good. Hey, just a quick exercise as you're watching, you're like, okay, well, let me test my knowledge really quick. Let me see if I can actually identify some of these styles in the field, literally, right? In the field. So I just for simple instruction or simple context, don't worry about identifying all four. I just want you to test your knowledge on looking for extroverted personalities and introverted personalities. Let's look at this clip.
What do you do once you catch it?
Run.
Run like the wind.
I'm running like the wind. I'm not on my soul. So where am I? Alton, you're going left, I'm going right, and you're going straight. No matter what. Okay? No matter what, guys. No matter what.
Hands on your knees so they know you're ready, okay?
Okay, let's wait for it. Now, boys!
Oh, go, buddy! Oh, nice cut! Keep going, buddy! Run hard, guys! Run hard! Run hard! Let's keep our eye on the ball, and as soon as...
This is what I kind of do with my dad. Stand right there. Stand right there.
Oh, belly bump. You guys need a belly bump. You're watching a belly bump.
Belly bump.
Let's say go, JJ. Cheer, boys.
I'm stronger than him. Are people gonna try to get my flash?
Yeah.
So, are we supposed to not let them, like, reach the...
Yes. You get two guys on my running back, left, right.
Dad, why does someone always need to do that?
It's called a huddle. Bam, let's move a little tight.
Why can't we do a huddle? Flag football makes no sense to me. Every time I try to do my part, it always fails. The other team sucks.
There you go. Go. Don't give it a hit. No. You're hitting the road.
That was not part of the plan.
that was not
part of the plan.
love
just
it.
a fun exercise, man. When you start to just be patient, not get overwhelmed, like, oh my God, this is so much I have to learn. Just have fun with it and look to just see how are the students behaving? What is that demeanor and personality style like? And what are the unique traits? And you really start to enjoy it. You'll start to see that this can be a fun exercise, something that you enjoy doing. And it really just creates more engagement. It really opens it up for that kind of talk.
I love it. And just like watching that, I don't know if you guys noticed, but you do immediately connect with the kid that you think is most like you. I without even doing it on purpose, I'm like, oh, I love that kid. And I'm like, oh, because that's what I would have done. And so it's important for us to pause and realize that we do that without even thinking, when really we love all the kids and we have to make sure that we're connecting and engaging with all of them.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to making a decision. Am I going to move off my assumptions, or am I going to look at the evidence? Because once we look at the evidence and you go, oh, this kid's asking questions. Mm-hmm. The old me, Moose, was like, before this evidence, I'm like, every time, why are you asking me a million questions?
So many.
But now, Moose, because we both have the same goal, and that's his or her, their learning outcomes, now I can go, oh, they're not informed. Oh, they don't understand. And they can't connect until they understand. Oh, Eric, you got to slow down and answer whatever question they're asking so that you can help them to get it, so that they can connect to the information and then got it, Eric, slow down, makes sense.
Or I was just going to throw this out. Or if there are those personalities in your classroom that are going to ask all the questions, maybe you want to come and get in front of that with a rubric or detailed learning goals on the board that are going to answer most of the questions that they have. And that will help you too, to not feel frustrated by having to pause to answer all those questions if you kind of try to front load and get them that information quicker.
And I'm going to tell you, Katie, why I said in the beginning, this simplifies. Mm-hmm. Now, some people, may be like, Eric, but I look at it as a FAQ. Right. So being an entrepreneur and being in the business world, Katie, there's probably only 40 questions that everybody asks. What time do you wake up so early? What time do you go to bed? It's like there are general questions that people ask ET. And I've come to realize it's really probably only about 40 or 50 questions. So we have an FAQ. We literally have you go and there's an FAQ and you can figure out. And so when you're talking about preferences, the kids that ask questions, if you're teaching the 8th grade, if you do what you said and get in front of it, then every kid is going to pretty much ask those same, when they get to your grade, they're going to have the same questions and the same concerns. And just imagine you having a document that now you don't even have to get frustrated. You don't even have to, you just say, hey, every year, hey, here it goes. And I'm telling you, 90% of the time, it's going to be the same issues, the same concerns, the same. And what this does is allow us to be aware of those. And like you said, Katie, prepare. And then once we're prepared, man, it's just so much less work. And I'll be honest with you guys, as a very fast-paced, spontaneous, creative, innovative human, being with individuals who are way more methodical, it has really helped me, because when I get up now, I literally have a rubric when I speak. And all I have to do now is fill in the blank. And if I want to be creative, I can go outside of it. But man, does it help to be methodical, because I hit more people in the room than I ever did by being fast-paced, spontaneous, all over the place. And people would leave and go, hey, man, that was dynamic, but what were we supposed to do with that energy? So I think it's important for us to value each one. And when we value and understand each one, we now know which buttons to push to help people get engaged, right? Which is important. To help them connect, which is important, right? To help them to be as creative as they can possibly be in their own particular space, right? Because that's what it's about. To me, knowledge is not about some stale information. It's about being creative. And so we just really want you guys to know, this is not meant to complicate your life. This is not meant to just give you a whole bunch more information. But to be able to say, wow, we can't, what's the word I'm looking for? Again, this is not to limit people or to put people in a box, but to say, hey, I have a starting point that this is how I understand people, and this is how I help people to engage in a way that's going to help them to be successful. All right, Moose.
Man, so good. Yeah. And as we take this thing home, just to kind of put it all together, ultimately, we're frustrated because we speak different languages. All right. Just think of them as different languages. Each style is a different language. But to influence, to have that, say, respect or that relationship that I really want to have with the student to create positive outcomes, I have to practice the art of delayed gratification and speak their language. That's when it really starts to click, and you'll see that buy-in and that trust that you're looking for. And it just makes teaching a lot more fun. So just some practical advice or strategies that we can look for to bring this thing home, and really recognizing the difference between assumption-based decision, right? As we talked about, assumption-based decision is just assumption that, or a decision that is based in belief. It's an unchallenged belief. And so I'm just making decisions based on how I see the world, or based on what I think it should be or how it should be. But when I take an evidence-based approach, I'm looking at now combining critical thinking and the best available evidence. I'm bringing this information that, like what we're talking about, we're bringing these two together, and I'm just not relying on, look at that, received wisdom and personal experiences, right? Like that's really the main difference between the two. And if we can just start there, right? This is our first interaction. It's the first time we get to meet. So if we were to just start here, you'll start to see that little by little, this thing comes together. And so lastly, now, when you start to think about, well, how do I maybe even infuse some of this into my lesson planning? And Katie, you did really an excellent job talking about, bringing it together. But it's exactly that. When you think of the flight attendant, and by the way, we referenced the flight attendant because think about the flight attendant's role on a flight. They're servicing the people. They do really the most amount of interaction than any of the other characters involved. And so give an opportunity for the students to interact and maybe do some group work, right? That is going to really engage them a little bit more. When you think about the grounds crew, they have to follow a step-by-step process, especially when it's in writing. It just puts them at ease. It makes them feel safe. They know their biggest worry and concern is, man, what if I did this wrong? What if I mess up? Well, that checklist, I can immediately go and say, oh, no, I'm still on the right page. Okay, good. I can keep working through. It's like that open book test. We all love open book tests in school. And I think it really satisfies the grounds crew the most here. And then, of course, the air traffic control, just be patient here. They're going to ask a couple of questions, just a couple. But Katie, I think, what was it that you shared here just in terms of preparing that in advance so that it doesn't come off as frustrating or irritating?
Yeah, I mean, even just having those things on the board ahead of time, the big FAQs that you think they're going to come up with, or getting those really detailed in your syllabus, or providing a rubric before each assignment so they know, what are those steps, and also the why. I mean, we all know the kids that are like, why do I have to read this? So let's just provide them with that ahead of time. This is why. This is the text we're reading today, and this is why. And this is how I know it's going to impact you and your learning and your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Musa, we could just go there. I think, Katie, you did an excellent job of it, and maybe we can even infuse it in this presentation, Moose, for those teachers who may not have been present when we did, our training for their particular school. But when Katie talks about, how many kids, finish high school and what they will make compared to their peers, or if you go to college or a trade school, this is important. And I know sometimes, again, bias moves why I teach and why they come to school is two different things. Mm-hmm. And I think if we're not careful, we'll get those confused. Why I'm teaching, like why I'm showing up every day versus why you're coming to school is totally different. And a lot of our students don't know why, and they don't know how. So I love what you guys, Moose, what you're putting forth, because it's saying maybe you do the interactive with others piece and the experiential learning. Maybe you do that, but maybe you don't do the step-by-step thing. Like maybe you don't have, when you do your lesson plan, it's not step-by-step. Or maybe you do step-by-step, but you don't do why and how. And I think what you're saying is so important. So I don't want teachers to look at this and go, well, we can't. No. Are you doing this? And are you doing it at the highest level? And perhaps the learning outcomes could be different, and we can narrow the gap, especially the achievement gap, by doing what? Just adding these components to what we do every single day. Finally, Moose, the last one, I apologize.
Yeah, the pilot, man. Just know the pilot, and again, where they sit on the plane, they're going somewhere. They care about the outcome. So they want to see the connection. Hey, how is this going to help me make some money? How is this going to help me be number one and get ahead? You know, think of Money Making Mike. Money Making Mike is very competitive. You know, he wants to get to it. And so help him connect the dots and just those interesting fun facts about, hey, this, if you learn this, it's going to help you do that. Just that contact. It's like, oh, Money Making Mike is going to love that. It's going to be like, okay, let's go ahead and do that then, because I know that that's what is on the other side of this. So that's that final piece to it.
Good. All right. Man, guys, we hope you have, taken at least one or two concepts. Again, we're in the people business. And anytime you start to bring multiple people together, you automatically bring multiple personalities and preferences together, and if we would just learn, man, I'm not the only one in the room. I'm not the only one in the room. And yes, in my house, Moose, and my children are adults now. And one of the biggest challenges is still, as a family, where we're going to go eat. One of the biggest challenges still is, what do you want to eat? What do you want to eat? What do you want to eat? And I was sharing with Dee the other day, she's like, where do you want to go? I said, hey, let's just do this. Let's figure out where you want to go. And I'm sure there's something in that same neighborhood, for me. She's like, well, I want us all to eat together, And so, while it seems like a small task, literally us deciding where we're going to eat as a family and picking the right place has so much to do with the health, emotional, mental, health and wellness of us as a family, and we've had to learn how to go, all right, well, Dee picks on Monday, Jada picks on Tuesday, I pick Wednesday, Jada picks on, we really had to get to that point, or do multiple places and then come home and sit down. But Dee likes her food hot. So the 15-minute drive home, her food's getting, but again, this may seem, minute to some of you, but being in a healthy marriage for over almost 33 years, still having a phenomenal relationship with my 27-year-old and 24-year-old, it takes not, I want to go here, but we. So we go from I to we, and knowing what they are, what their preferences are, it helps quite a bit. They only got about 3 or 4 cuisines that they actually love, and I've got to figure out, to Katie's point, which restaurants locally take care of that. And, but it's fun, Moose. We're not looking at getting a divorce anytime soon. I'm not looking to get new kids anytime soon. Is it work? Absolutely. But it can be fun. And again, we're all pros. We all enrolled in the university and then became teachers because we want to win and we want to help kids win. So don't forget that. Don't let the complexity overwhelm you. Don't get frustrated. We're going to give you a tool that will simplify. Hey, here's who's in the room. Here are the preferences. Here are some of the strategies that we can take. We're not saying that it's going to create a perfect world, but we are saying people are going to work together at a higher level. And we know when people work together and people are respectful of each other's preferences and personalities, we just know that is an environment where magic can happen. We've seen it in other schools. We have the evidence, the empirical data to prove this stuff works. And so I know a lot of you may be like, I don't know. We're telling you it works. if you work it. It's work for us, it's work for other school districts, and it's not one-dimensional. It's not urban only. We've been in urban schools, we've been in rural schools, we've been in suburban schools. It just works when you care enough to know more about a human and use the evidence you have to move them down the yellow brick road. Follow. Follow the yellow brick road. All right, it's your boy E.T. It's Katie. It's Mustafa. And we look forward to working with you guys a lot more. And stay tuned for our next series.
Welcome back, everybody, to Mass Impact, the education podcast, episode 24. And today we've got a special bonus episode with a professional development session. This is a full PD session today from E.T., Moose, and Katie. We called in the all-star team for today's episode. And we talked a lot about decisions based on assumptions versus decisions based on evidence, right? Evidence versus decisions. Now, of course, as educators, a lot of us got into the field because we care about kids. Hopefully all of us got into the field because we care about kids. And we might think that we automatically make all of our decisions based on evidence based off of that presupposition. We care, therefore we're going to do what's best for the kids based on what we see, what the evidence tells us. But sometimes we have to challenge ourselves. We have to really reflect and see, are we being evidence-based or are we being feelings-based, assumptions-based, taking things as they come without really applying that depth of analysis to each and every one of the classroom decisions that we're all forced to make every single day. So in this episode, the whole team talked about using the flight assessment as a tool to help us understand how to engage all children and help them excel. Now, of course, the flight assessment is a tool that is really designed to help explain the personalities of different kids. And the way that I like to think about the flight assessment is that it makes sense of things that we already know but don't understand. Let me unpack that for you. It makes sense of things that we know but we don't understand. What does that mean? Well, we know that there are certain kids in our classrooms that we tend to communicate with more naturally. They seem to be a little bit more like us. They seem to just get it when we deliver instruction. They like the way that we teach. We like the way that they learn. But of course, we know that all kids are different. And because of the assessment and all of the psychological research that's been done leading up to the development of the flight assessment, we know that there are 4 main types of personalities, 4 main styles of communication, right? We talked about our pilot, our flight attendants, our grounds crew, and our air traffic control. Those are the 4 personalities that are identified within the flight assessment. Now, once we begin to understand how each of those 4 styles communicate naturally, how each of those 4 styles learn naturally, how each of those 4 styles feel comfortable in any given environment, including the classroom environment. Once we can start to consider the different personalities that are in that room as we're teaching, we can begin to engage not just the students that are like us, because let's be honest, we tend to teach the way that we like to be taught. We try to teach others the way that we want to learn ourselves. We want to coach the way that we would like to be coached, and we communicate the way we would like to be communicated with. And while that's a perfectly natural thing to do, we have to get to a point where we have elevated our consciousness, where we are more aware consciously of the way that we're communicating and how that comes across to other people. Because as Moose mentioned on the episode, communication is really not the key. Comprehension is the key. If we are communicating all day long in that classroom, and I know you felt it before, you've communicated for 8 hours and it feels like there was no comprehension. You communicated for 8 hours and it feels like it just wasn't getting through to that end recipient that you were trying to give that communication to, give that lesson to, give that teaching to. Well, that's because communication isn't key. Comprehension is key. How well it is understood and how well it is applied during the lesson, after the lesson, how well it's integrated into that individual's existing knowledge base. Well, that's really the key metric for success. And the flight assessment is something that helps us do that with phenomenal precision. Now, of course, Moose also shared some visuals that really helped us understand that there are more ways for us to communicate that will reach more students. And of course, that is the goal. So we can do this together. Now, I got a quick example for you of this whole concept of it's not that there's a right or wrong way to teach or a right or wrong way to communicate, but it can be situational. So we were in New York, right? I took my mom to New York for Christmas. That was her Christmas present this year, was she had always wanted to see New York City. And so I flew her and my dad out there, and we had a whole family trip of it for Christmas. And we were getting driven around in an Uber on our way to one of the attractions that we were going to visit. And the light had turned green, and we're sitting at an intersection, okay? The light had turned green, and there's still cars that are kind of going back and forth the other way, even though their lights were red and our light was green. And our Uber driver started inching forward into the intersection. My mom said, whoa, 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 what's going on here? I'm not used to this, right? She's from Alabama, so she's from the South. And she said, why don't we just hang back where we were and let everybody else cross and be courteous to them and not get in the way? And I said, Mom, this is New York City. It's not that the methodology that you want to use of being courteous to the other drivers and being a little bit more passive and hanging back. It's not that that's wrong, but it is wrong in this environment. New York City, the traffic is different. They will run you over if you are not incredibly assertive. So I said, listen, it's not that that's wrong, or it's not even that the people in New York City drive wrong or incorrectly, or that they just do things so differently that it isn't effective. It's just different, and it's effective for them in this environment. If they went to the South and drove the way that you drove, they wouldn't be very successful. And if you came up here and you were driving the way that you would normally drive in the South, you wouldn't be very successful up here. The same thing goes for our communication. There are certain types of people who need us to communicate with direct assertiveness. There are other people who need us to sugarcoat things a little bit and be a little bit more friendly and emotional. The flight assessment unpacks all of this for us. But the point here is that there is no right or wrong way of teaching. There's no right or wrong way of learning. There's no right or wrong way of communicating. But there is circumstances where certain techniques or styles of communication are better suited for the comprehension of certain students. When you learn your students, when you use the assessment to learn how they communicate, how they learn, how they receive information, and what your natural predisposition is on how you naturally communicate and give information, you will be so much better equipped to engage each and every child in your classrooms. Guys, thank you so much for watching Access EDU. This is the Education Podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.